After 8 months of blindness, my sight returned. But it wasn't joy I found. I saw my daughter-in-law, Serena, going through my jewelry, planning my future in a facility. They thought I was a helpless burden. I simply closed my eyes, smiling. They had no idea I was watching, waiting. This is my story of quiet retribution. Like, share, and let me know where you are listening from. After 8 months of perpetual twilight, then absolute darkness, a miracle unfolded one Tuesday morning. My vision, dim and wavering at first, solidified into shape, then color. The pattern of the wallpaper, the grain of the antique dresser, the gentle flutter of the curtains, they all returned, sharp and clear. It was a rebirth, a silent explosion of light that made my heart pound with a fierce, untamed joy. But that joy was immediately followed by a chilling instinct, to keep this newfound sight a secret. The doctors had warned of a slow, gradual recovery. I would simply pretend, and so, I kept my eyes closed when expected, opened them only to observe, letting the world reveal itself in a way it never would have otherwise. The very first clear image to imprint itself on my newly restored retina was Serena. My daughter-in-law stood by my dresser, her back to me, her hands deep in my cherished jewelry box. The box, a gift from Arthur, held not just jewels, but generations of memories. Serena wasn't merely tidying. Her long, slender fingers sifted through each piece with a possessive air, as if taking inventory. My breath hitched, a silent, involuntary gasp I quickly stifled. My heart, still racing from the wonder of sight, now throbbed with a cold, sharp dread. This wasn't the first time I'd felt an uneasy chill, even in my blindness. But now, with my eyes open, everything took on horrifying clarity. I recalled the day the bandages first came off. Weeks prior, feigning sleep, adjusting to the sudden light, I'd overheard Serena's voice, hushed but distinct, from the hallway. Michael, Arthur's nephew, was with her. "It's just too much for Arthur, isn't it?" Serena had murmured, her voice saccharine but sharp. "He's devoted, bless his heart. But for how long can he keep this up?" Michael's reply had been hesitant. "He does look tired." "Serena, exactly," she'd pressed. "We need to discuss other arrangements for Eleanor. She's becoming a burden." The word, burden. It had pierced me then, a brutal stab to the heart. Now, seeing Serena's calculating face, the way she handled my grandmother's pearls, the word echoed with a horrifying resonance. I remained still, feigning the deep, unseeing sleep of the truly infirm. My eyes, narrowed to mere slits, missed nothing. Serena lifted my grandmother's pearl necklace from its velvet nest. The pearls, a string of luminous family history. She clasped them on, turning to admire herself in the large cheval mirror. Her reflection stared back, draped in my legacy. Her eyes alight with a proprietary gleam. It was a brazen act of appropriation, performed right here, in my bedroom. While I lay supposedly helpless, a cold fury began to simmer beneath my carefully maintained composure. She then moved to the large bay windows, pulling a small tape measure from her pocket. She held it against the frame, her lips moving silently. "When we redecorate," I heard her whisper. "When we redecorate. Not Arthur and I. Not even Arthur and Serena, but we," implying a future where this house would be shaped entirely by her vision, devoid of my presence. The audacity was breathtaking. Hours later, the familiar sound of the front door and Arthur's heavy footsteps reached my ears. He walked with the weary shuffle of someone carrying an invisible weight. I heard Serena rush to meet him, her voice undergoing an instant transformation. The calculating gleam in her eyes vanished, replaced by a mask of tender concern. "Oh, my darling, you look utterly drained," she cooed. "How is Eleanor today?" Arthur sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. He entered my room, his shoulders slumped, his kind eyes etched with worry lines. My heart ached for him, knowing the relentless demands of caregiving. "She's been having some rather confused days," Serena said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur, as if I possessed no capacity to hear. "Wandering a little, mistaking things. I think her memory is starting to go, Arthur. Arthur's face crumpled further. Confused days? Oh, my poor mother. Maybe we should call Dr. Peterson. He always knows what to do. Well, of course, we could, Serena said, her tone suggesting it was terribly inconvenient. But for her, complex needs, perhaps some of those lovely places we looked at online might be more appropriate. They specialize in round-the-clock care, dear, and they're so beautiful. Like country estates. Really, a proper stimulation program. I felt a sharp pang of sympathy for Arthur, even as a raw, burning rage built inside me. He was being cornered. I knew this conversation was hitting him hard, pulling at the threads of his deeply ingrained sense of duty. He had made a solemn promise to me years ago. "I will never put you in a home, Mama," he'd vowed. "You'll always be with us." His loyal heart was being twisted. It was then, watching Serena's subtle glances, her perfectly timed sighs, the way she steered his worry towards a single solution, that I understood the full extent of her cunning. Serena wasn't just covetous, she was a master manipulator. Each word, each gesture, was a step to remove me and consolidate her own position. That evening, Arthur came to sit by my bed. He held my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "Mama," he murmured, his voice thick with concern. "You're safe with us. Always." But with my newly sharpened senses, I heard the tremor in his voice, sensed the underlying doubt behind the reassurance. He was fighting Serena's influence, but he was weakening. The thought, cold and desolate, shattered a piece of my heart. A cold resolve settled over me then. I had spent 8 months in darkness. Now I was seeing with a clarity that went beyond mere vision. Serena wanted a game. Eleanor would play. I would remain blind, confused, and helpless in her eyes. But underneath that facade, I would be watching. Every calculated move. Every deceptive word. Serena, in her arrogance, would surely make mistakes. And I, the supposedly frail, fading matriarch, would be there to catch every single one. The knowledge gave me a strange, unsettling calm. The game had begun. The days that followed were a torturous ballet of deception, with Serena pirouetting through our lives and me, the seemingly blind and frail spectator, observing her every calculated step. My regained sight was a double-edged sword. It revealed the depth of her machinations, but compelled me to maintain my vulnerable facade. One afternoon, while Arthur was out running errands, I heard Serena's light footsteps approaching his study. I waited, holding my breath, before slowly, silently pushing my bedroom door ajar. From my vantage point in the hallway, I could see directly into the room Arthur used as his office. There, illuminated by the afternoon sun, was Serena, her head bent over Arthur's large oak desk. She wasn't looking at paperwork. She was holding her phone, snapping pictures. As I watched, horrified, she carefully placed what looked like an official document back into a leather folder. It was the house deed. Our home, the one Arthur and I had built together, was now a digital image on her phone. Moments later, I heard her hushed voice on the phone. "Yes, the valuation came back as expected," she murmured. "It's quite significant. Now, the next step is getting that power of attorney. We need to secure everything for future considerations." The casual way she spoke, as if discussing a grocery list, sent a shiver down my spine. Power of attorney. My mind raced. She wasn't just planning to move me out. She intended to take legal control of every asset Arthur and I possessed. The house, our savings, everything we had worked for our entire lives. Later that day, when Arthur called home, Serena orchestrated another performance. "Oh, Arthur, darling." It was another one of those days. She sighed dramatically into the phone. "Your mother asked me who I was, and she couldn't remember Michael's middle name, poor dear. Just completely blank. She keeps insisting he's Michael David, but it's Michael James, of course." I clenched my fists under the blanket. Michael's middle name was David. Serena was fabricating memory lapses, weaving a tapestry of decline around me. meticulously designed to paint me as incapable, bewildered, and in dire need of specialized care. I was speaking to that lovely lady at the Peaceful Haven facility. I heard her continue, her voice low and persuasive. She mentioned a wonderful program where the house can be used as collateral for long-term care. They call it protected assets. It sounds so reassuring, doesn't it? Knowing it's all taken care of. The word collateral hung in the air, a poisonous plume. She wasn't just trying to get me out. She was trying to get me out and use the house to pay for it, potentially absorbing the remainder of our estate as her reward for managing my care. The front door opened unexpectedly early, announcing Arthur's return. Serena, startled, quickly shoved the deed folder back into the desk drawer, leaving it slightly ajar in her haste. She composed herself instantly, a practiced smile on her face as she greeted Arthur. "How was your afternoon, love?" Arthur asked, sounding weary. Serena rushed to him, her voice brimming with feigned concern. "Oh, Arthur, thank goodness you're back. Your mother was so restless. She was confused about who I was, kept asking where she was, as if she didn't recognize her own home." She glanced towards my room, a smirk flickering across her face before she quickly erased it. Arthur's face was etched with worry. "Perhaps I should just stay home tomorrow. I don't like leaving her alone like this." My heart sank. Being alone with Serena was a terrifying prospect. I couldn't risk her finding out I could see, nor could I endure her silent, predatory presence. I had to intervene. From my bed, I called out in a voice I hoped sounded appropriately weak and disoriented. "Arthur? Is that you, dear? The air feels so heavy in here. Could you perhaps take me out for some fresh air? Just around the garden, perhaps?" Arthur brightened immediately. "Of course, Mama. That's a wonderful idea." Serena's smile tightened, her eyes flashing with irritation at my unexpected request. My carefully crafted disoriented act, though painful for Arthur to witness, served its purpose. It solidified Serena's narrative while saving me from her company. It tore at my soul to cause my son such anguish. But I knew, with chilling certainty, that this was the only path forward. In the days that followed, I became a phantom in my own home, gliding through silence, seeing without being seen. I noticed Serena constantly texting, her phone clutched in her hand, and when she thought no one was looking, she would discreetly snap pictures of the antique grandfather clock, the silver tea set, the delicate porcelain figurines in the display cabinet. Each flash of her phone was a theft in progress, a cataloging of what she considered her future spoils. Then, Michael arrived, invited over by Serena, I suspected, for another consultation about my supposed decline. "Thank you for coming, Michael," Serena said, her voice laced with manufactured distress. "Arthur's beside himself with worry. She's getting so much worse. This morning, she didn't even recognize me. She asked me who I was and where Arthur was, and then started talking about the house as if it were a hotel. I lay perfectly still in my room, absorbing every word. The lies spilled from her lips with effortless grace. Michael's brow furrowed. That's serious, Serena. How is Arthur coping?" "He's exhausted," she replied, her voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. "He loves his mother dearly. But this level of care, it's unsustainable. I really think we need to seriously consider a specialized facility. For her own good, of course." She leaned in conspiratorially. "I'm so worried she might wander off if she goes out for a walk, or fall when she's alone. These places have secure environments, round-the-clock supervision. It's truly for the best." Watching her, I felt a strange mix of revulsion and grudging admiration. Serena was brilliant. Truly, she wasn't just stealing. She was cloaking her theft in the guise of genuine concern, making every predatory move seem like an act of selfless love. She wasn't just making Arthur feel guilty. She was recruiting Michael, subtly turning him into an unwitting accomplice. They thought they were protecting me, saving me. In reality, they were paving the way for my undoing, preparing to divest me of my home, my independence, and my dignity, all for my own good. The days blurred into a suffocating rhythm of feigned helplessness and silent observation. Every creak of the floorboards, every whispered word, became amplified to my newly sensitive ears. I learned to anticipate Serena's movements, to discern the subtle shifts in her tone. One evening, curled in my bed, I overheard her on the phone again. Her voice a low, conspiratorial hum. Michael's almost convinced, she purred into the receiver. He's just cautious, which is understandable. But Arthur is being stubborn. He keeps bringing up that old promise to his mother. It's a sentimental obstacle, nothing more. A pause. Yes. I'm already working on the documentation. We'll have plenty of evidence of her decline. We need to push for the move by next month at the latest. Before Christmas. Ideally. My blood ran cold. Documentation of her decline. She wasn't just lying. She was building a fake paper trail, coordinating with some complicit medical facility. All to justify ripping me from my home. The implications were chilling. She was systematically dismantling my life, piece by fraudulent piece. Once the power of attorney is secured, I heard her continue. And she's settled. The house will be ours. And of course, the life savings, the pension, the investments, all tied up in her care. It's a tidy sum, isn't it? By Christmas, this will all be resolved. The words, delivered with a chilling nonchalance, were a death knell to my life as I knew it. By Christmas, just weeks away. The timeline was brutally efficient. A cold, hard rage, pure and unadulterated, solidified within me. It wasn't the rage of a desperate woman, but of a warrior. My heart, which had throbbed with fear and sorrow, now beat with a fierce, unwavering determination. Serena thought she was orchestrating my demise. She had no idea she was igniting my rebirth. My counterattack, though unseen, had already begun. My attention, however, was about to be drawn to a more immediate, personal betrayal. One evening, I made my way, with my usual shuffling gait and blank stare, to the living room. Arthur was seated on the sofa, lost in a book, the lamplight casting a gentle glow on his tired face. I feigned a confused sigh and settled into my armchair, pretending to gaze blankly at the unlit fireplace. Moments later, Serena entered, a glass of wine in her hand, dressed in a silk robe that clung just a little too closely. She glided across the room, not towards me, but towards Arthur. She sat beside him, too close, her thigh brushing his. My stomach churned. She reached out, her fingers tracing the tense line of his shoulder. "You look so tired, my darling," she murmured, her voice a low, seductive purr. "Always giving, always caring. But who cares for you, Arthur?" Arthur shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "I'm fine, Serena. Just a long day." She ignored his subtle discomfort, her fingers kneading his shoulder. "David won't be home for hours, and Leona is having one of her difficult days," she whispered, referencing her husband and my supposed confusion, as if those facts somehow created an invitation. "It's just us." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken invitation. Arthur tried to pull away, but she held him gently, persuasively. "Don't be silly, Arthur. You're a vibrant, attractive man. You deserve companionship, warmth, someone to truly see you." Her eyes flickered towards me, a silent, contemptuous message. Then she turned back to Arthur, her hand lifting to gently cup his cheek, her thumb caressing the stubble on his jaw. Her other hand moved to his chest, a light, lingering touch. "Eleanor doesn't really see you anymore, does she?" Her voice was barely audible, a venomous whisper aimed at undermining decades of love and devotion. She leaned closer. Her scent, a heady mix of perfume and wine, wafting towards him. "Let me make you feel alive again, Arthur. You deserve to be happy." The implication was clear. I was a dead weight, an obstacle to his happiness, and she was the solution, the vibrant replacement. She was exploiting my supposed blindness, twisting it into a weapon to sever the bond between a mother and her son, between a husband and his devoted wife. She continued, leveraging the very burden she had amplified. "All this stress, this endless care. It's not fair to you. Imagine a life free of all that. Just us." She painted a picture of blissful liberation, a future where my absence was the key to his joy. Arthur was silent, his gaze fixed on the book in his lap, though I knew he wasn't reading. The seconds stretched, agonizingly long. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. "Say no, Arthur. Say no." Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. I need some time to think about it, Serena." The words were a hammer blow to my chest. Time to think about it. Not a firm rejection, not a loyal defense of his marriage, of his mother. Just time to think. It wasn't an affirmation, but it wasn't a denial either. It was the first crack in the foundation of his loyalty, and it tore at the very fabric of my being. Serena, ever the opportunist, didn't flinch. She smiled, a triumphant, knowing smile. She leaned in, her lips brushing his cheek. "Of course, darling. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. And I promise, I'll take very good care of you." Her eyes, full of predatory triumph, met mine for a fleeting second before I quickly closed them, feigning a soft, blind sigh. She thought I saw nothing. She had no idea the depth of the betrayal I had just witnessed, nor the cold fire it had kindled within me. The air in the living room felt thick with a chilling silence after Serena finally departed, leaving Arthur alone, and me, supposedly unseeing, in my armchair. My initial rage had given way to a profound, sickening numbness. Time to think about it. Arthur, my Arthur, had actually hesitated. 42 years of marriage, a lifetime of shared dreams and unspoken vows, had been reduced to a mere option in the face of Serena's calculated seduction. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, deep and festering. A while later, I heard the shower running, then the gentle sounds of Arthur moving about the bedroom. He emerged, smelling faintly of soap and shampoo, his presence a comforting, yet now complex aroma. He came into the living room, settling beside me, his hand gently covering mine. His touch, usually a source of unwavering comfort, now felt heavy with an unspoken guilt. "How are you feeling, Mama?" he asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I feigned a long, slow blink. "A little tired, dear, just a little tired." He squeezed my hand. "Mama, I wanted to ask you something." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Hypothetically, of course, if something were to happen to me, or if I couldn't manage your care anymore, would you want to stay here, in our home? Or would you consider other options, somewhere with more specialized care, perhaps?" My heart pounded. This was it. Serena's insidious words were now being echoed by Arthur, twisted into a question designed to sound like concern, but rooted in her manipulation. I had to respond carefully, firmly, yet still within the confines of my confused persona. "Arthur," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it, "this is my home, our home. It's where I belong, with you. I don't want to be anywhere else, never." I hoped the conviction in my tone cut through the fog of my act, reaching the core of his decency. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb stroking my hand. "Of course, Mama. You're safe here. Always." He used the exact words Serena had used to imply my eventual placement in a facility. Safe. The irony was bitter. It was clear he was wrestling with something profound, something that deeply troubled him. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my eyes seeing every detail of our familiar room, my mind replaying the scene in the living room. Had our 42 years truly meant so little? Was he so easily swayed by a younger woman's calculated attention, by the promise of a life free of the burden of my care? The thought was unbearable. Then, just as the first sliver of dawn began to paint the sky, I heard it. A low mumble, from Arthur's side of the bed. It was barely audible, but my senses were hyper-alert. "No," he whispered, tossing restlessly. "Can't do that to Eleanor. Can't." He repeated it, firmer this time. "No, I won't. I can't." A spark, faint but undeniable, ignited within me. A fragile tendril of hope. He was fighting it. He was battling Serena's insidious influence, even in his sleep. Perhaps there was more to Arthur's silence, to his hesitation, than simple capitulation. Perhaps he was building his own defenses, not against me, but for me. My suspicions gained traction later that morning. Arthur, believing I was still sound asleep, slipped out of bed and into his study. My door was slightly ajar, just enough for sound to travel. I heard him dialing, the low murmur of a conversation beginning. "Yes, I got everything on tape," Arthur said, his voice low and tense. "All of it. Her propositions, her suggestions, everything. It's quite damning." Tom, relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees, flooded through me. On tape, all of it. He had recorded Serena. He hadn't just been a passive recipient of her advances. He had been actively gathering evidence. He had seen through her performance, or at least suspected it, and had chosen to act. The attempted seduction, the insinuations, the calculated whispers. Arthur had recorded every damning word. "She's also been rather insistent about me updating my will," Arthur continued, his voice laced with a cold anger I rarely heard from him, "asking if I'd considered making her the executor, suggesting a more efficient distribution of assets in case anything happens to you, darling." His tone dripped with sarcasm. "She's getting desperate, Tom. I need to know everything you've found out about her financial situation, her background, and that peaceful haven facility she keeps pushing. I want a full dossier. This isn't just about my mother anymore. This is about protecting everything we've built. Tom, a private investigator. My Arthur, my kind, gentle Arthur, was conducting a full-blown investigation. He wasn't succumbing to Serena's charms or her schemes. He was playing his own game, a counter-offensive launched in the shadows, all while maintaining the facade of a weary, overwhelmed husband. I lay in bed, the warmth of tears pricking my eyes, tears of profound gratitude, of immense love, and a fresh wave of determination. Arthur hadn't been weak. He had been strong, cunning, and fiercely protective. He had been quietly safeguarding me, gathering evidence, even while enduring the emotional torment of Serena's brazen betrayal. My husband, my anchor, had been fighting for us all along, and now I would fight alongside him, with my sight as my silent weapon. The game was truly on. This is part 5 of my story, and if you've been gripped so far, you won't want to miss what happens next. The truth about Serena is about to unravel, and my quiet revenge will finally begin. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to follow this journey to its very end. The revelation of Arthur's secret investigation had been a profound comfort, a balm to my wounded heart. Yet, it also brought a new layer of questions. How long had he known? How many of Serena's veiled threats and manipulative whispers had he quietly endured? Gathering evidence, all while maintaining his composure. The thought of him bearing this burden alone, while I lay supposedly oblivious, filled me with a complex mix of love and sorrow. But there was no time for reflection. Serena was escalating. She was moving to deliver the final, crushing blow. One brisk morning, Serena arrived with Michael, her usual air of controlled efficiency, now tinged with a predatory urgency. They entered the house, their voices hushed, yet perfectly audible to my waiting ears. I lay in bed, feigning a deep, untroubled sleep. My eyes, however, seeing everything through the barely perceptible crack in my bedroom door. "She's getting worse every day, Michael," Serena declared, her voice a stage whisper. This morning, she didn't even recognize Arthur at breakfast. Called him, "my dear," instead of his name, as if he were a stranger. It was heartbreaking. A flicker of anger ignited in my chest. Another lie, another calculated fabrication. I had, in fact, called Arthur my dear. A lifelong term of endearment, a private pet name we shared. Serena had twisted it into a symptom of my supposed cognitive decline, weaving her web of deceit tighter around my son, around Michael. "The peaceful haven facility has an opening," she pressed on, her voice imbued with a false sense of urgency. "It's perfect, exactly what she needs. Arthur can't handle much more of this, Michael. He's at his breaking point. We need to act quickly, for everyone's sake." They moved into the living room, and I followed their voices, drifting silently to the doorway, my blind gaze fixed on the floor, my ears straining. Serena perched on the arm of a chair, facing Michael, her expression a picture of sorrowful resolve. "She's just gone, Michael," she said, her voice heavy with feigned grief. "The woman who raised you isn't really here anymore. It's a shell, a shadow. You saw it yourself, didn't you?" The confusion. Michael nodded slowly, his face etched with genuine pain. "It's hard to see her like this, Serena. It really is." My heart ached for him, knowing he truly believed my deterioration. He had always been a kind, sensitive boy, easily influenced by those he trusted. "Exactly." Serena seized upon his vulnerability. "That's why she needs specialized care, proper stimulation, a safe environment. This house, as much as we love it, isn't equipped for her complex needs anymore." Then, she unveiled the full extent of her scheme. "The papers are ready," she announced, her voice barely concealing a note of triumph. "The facility can take her by Thursday. All we need is Arthur's signature. It's a simple transfer of care, really." She paused, letting the words sink in, before continuing. "Of course, with her move, we'll need to establish legal guardianship, just to make sure all her financial decisions are handled properly. For her protection, you understand." My blood ran cold. Legal guardianship. This was the linchpin of her entire plan. With Arthur's signature, I would not only be banished from my home, but stripped of all legal autonomy. My life savings, my pension, every last cent would fall under her control. She was playing for keeps. Then came the bombshell that momentarily stunned even Michael. "I've already contacted a realtor," Serena added, almost as an afterthought, though I knew it was a carefully calculated piece of manipulation. "Once Eleanor is settled, it just makes sense to sell this house. It's far too large for Arthur alone, and the upkeep is tremendous. We can move him into a lovely condo nearby, something low maintenance. It will give him a fresh start, a new chapter." Michael's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. "Sell the house? But where will Arthur go?" The question was hesitant, revealing the first crack in his unquestioning acceptance of Serena's narrative. He was starting to see the edges of her greed, the extent of her ruthlessness. Serena waved away his concern with a dismissive hand. "A condo, as I said, much more practical. This place is an old relic. It's time for new beginnings for everyone." Her words were smooth, but the underlying intent was chillingly clear. Isolating Arthur, severing him from his history, from everything that reminded him of me and our life together, making him entirely dependent on her. Michael's resolve, though shaken, was still pliable. "But, Arthur, shouldn't we wait for him to be part of these decisions?" Serena's smile was chillingly confident. "Arthur's heart is too soft, Michael. He holds on to hope for Eleanor's recovery. But we both know that's just denial. It's a difficult truth to face. But someone has to make the practical decisions, and that falls to us, doesn't it?" She painted a picture of herself as the courageous one, the pragmatist making the tough, necessary choices, while Arthur was the emotional fool clinging to false hope. Her audacity was boundless, but as she spoke, a silent, knowing glance passed between me and the empty doorway where Arthur had just been. He had been listening, of that I was certain. Serena, in her brazen certainty of my blindness and Arthur's weakness, had laid bare her entire despicable plan. The stage was set. That evening, the house settled into a familiar quiet, a fragile calm before the storm I knew was brewing. Arthur returned from his usual Tuesday ritual, carrying a bag that diffused the comforting aroma of soy sauce and ginger Chinese takeout, our weekly tradition for as long as I could remember. He placed the containers on the dining table, then helped me to my seat, his hand a gentle guide on my arm. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the clinking of chopsticks, the only sound. My mind, however, was a whirlwind. The gravity of Serena's plan, laid bare for Michael that morning, weighed heavily on me. The realization that Thursday was the deadline, that my freedom and future hung by a thread, tightened its grip. It was now or never. I had to know if Arthur had heard her. If he truly understood. "Arthur, dear?" I ventured, my voice carefully modulated to sound a little hesitant, a little uncertain. Do you think Serena has been different lately? Perhaps a little too helpful?" Arthur stopped, his chopsticks poised mid-air. He slowly lowered them, placing them deliberately beside his plate. He then reached across the table, taking my hand in his. His touch was firm, steady, but his gaze, though I couldn't meet it directly, I knew would be intense. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "There's something I need to tell you." My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic bird. My blood ran cold, then hot. Was he going to confess his own doubts, his own weakness regarding Serena? Was he going to admit he was truly considering sending me away? Or was he going to reveal his investigation? The suspense was agonizing. I braced myself for anything. "I know about Serena," he stated, the words cutting through the air like a sharp blade. The shock was so profound that for a fleeting moment, I completely forgot my carefully constructed charade of blindness. My eyes flew open, wide and clear, staring directly at him. I caught a glimpse of his own eyes, deep with concern, before my brain screamed at me to close them. I blinked, feigning a slow, confused flutter, hoping he hadn't noticed my momentary lapse. "I know about her plans," Arthur continued, confirming my worst fears and my wildest hopes. "Her lies, the way she's been tampering with your things, the way she talks about the facility, the documentation of your decline, all of it." A wave of complex emotions washed over me. Relief that he knew, but also a surge of indignation. "Then why, Arthur?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you stop her? Why did you let her go on?" He squeezed my hand. "I couldn't just stop her, Eleanor. Not yet. She's too cunning. If I had confronted her too early, without solid evidence, she would have simply spun another lie, convinced Michael and everyone else that I was the one losing my mind, or that I was being cruel to deny you proper care. I needed real, undeniable proof for court. And I needed to prevent her from turning Michael completely against us, against you." He paused, then added, his voice softer. "And I saw you in the kitchen that night, Eleanor. When she made her play." My breath hitched. He had seen me? Had he seen my eyes open then too? Or did he mean he knew I was aware of what Serena was doing? "I knew you were hurt," he continued, answering my unspoken question, his voice filled with tenderness. "I knew you were seeing everything, in your own way. And I needed her to believe she was winning. I needed her to reveal her true intentions. Explicitly. On tape, it meant letting her think she was succeeding." My time to think response was just that. A way to keep her talking, to get more of it on record. He looked at me, his gaze unwavering, even though I feigned blindness. "Eleanor, in 42 years of marriage, I have never given you cause to doubt my faithfulness. I ask you to trust me now. More than ever." A profound sense of admiration, mingled with a new kind of guilt, washed over me. Arthur, my steady, quiet Arthur, had been playing a dangerous, intricate game of his own, a game I hadn't fully comprehended. He hadn't been weak. He had been shrewd. He hadn't been oblivious. He had been watching, building a meticulous case, protecting me in a way I couldn't have imagined, and all this time, I had withheld my greatest secret from him. The return of my sight. The weight of that secret suddenly felt heavier than ever. "Tomorrow," Arthur said, his voice hardening, "there will be a confrontation. It won't be easy. Michael will be hurt, confused. But we need to save our family. Eleanor, we need to expose her. Can you trust me?" I nodded, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. "Yes, Arthur," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "I trust you." I knew what I had to do. I had to continue my act, just a little longer. Arthur had given me a weapon, and I had one of my own. The truth would come out, and Serena, in her greed and arrogance, would be brought down. But for now, My secret remained mine. My sight. My silent advantage. The confession from Arthur had lifted a crushing weight from my shoulders, replacing it with a fierce, unified resolve. My husband, far from being a weak or unwitting participant, was a silent general, orchestrating a meticulously planned counterattack. Now, it was time to put the final pieces into place. Tuesday evening, Arthur returned home, a manila envelope clutched in his hand. His face, usually etched with worry, now held a grim determination, a glint in his eye I hadn't seen in months. He found me in the living room, knitting a blanket, my movements slow and deliberate, my gaze vacant. "Eleanor," he began, his voice low. "Serena called. She's arranged a family meeting for tomorrow night, for immediate decisions about your care." His tone dripped with contempt as he mimicked her saccharine phrasing. "She'll be bringing Michael, and she'll have the admission papers for Willowbrook." My fingers clenched around my knitting needles. Willowbrook, the lovely place Serena had touted. The one that used our house as collateral. "I took a trip there myself today," Arthur continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Without Serena, of course. I spoke with the administrator." He opened the manila envelope, pulling out a stack of documents. "Eleanor, their policy isn't just about collateral. It states that upon admission, patients are required to sign over all major assets to the facility as part of their long-term care package. The house, investments, everything. It's a complete transfer of ownership." My breath caught in my throat. My blood ran cold, then boiled. It wasn't just about the house. It was everything. She wasn't just planning to move me out. She was planning to literally steal my entire life's legacy. Willowbrook wasn't a care facility. It was a front for legalized theft. And Serena was its willing accomplice. The pure, unadulterated evil of her scheme hit me with the force of a physical blow. She planned to trap me, legally strip me of every possession, and then disappear with the spoils, leaving me a ward of the state. "And it gets worse," Arthur said, his voice grim. "They confirmed Serena has been in contact with them for over 2 months. She's been filling out preliminary paperwork, forging your signature, even providing fraudulent medical records detailing your supposed severe cognitive decline." He held up a document. "She even listed herself and Michael as your emergency contacts and medical decision-makers, without either of your knowledge or consent." The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking, criminal audacity. My own daughter-in-law, systematically dismantling my life, forging my signature, all behind our backs. "I let her think her plan was working," Arthur explained, his eyes meeting my feigned, unfocused gaze. "I needed her to be confident, to feel invincible. Because tomorrow night, with Michael there, she's going to make her final move. She's going to present those papers, and she's going to expect me to sign them." "What's our plan, Arthur?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, filled with a newfound steel. The question, for the first time, included both of us. Arthur looked at me, and a slow, genuine, fierce smile spread across his face. It was the smile of the old Arthur, the man who had faced down any challenge with unshakable resolve. "We're going to give her exactly what she thinks she wants, Eleanor," he declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "And then, we're going to destroy her." That night, as the house fell silent, Arthur laid out his plan with meticulous detail. Tom Richardson, the private investigator, had compiled a comprehensive dossier. It included photographic evidence of Serena rummaging through my jewelry, a timeline of her calls to Willowbrook, documented visits to the realtor, and even recordings of her hushed conversations about the assets and power of attorney. "And these," Arthur said, pulling out a small device from his pocket, "are from the hidden recorders I've placed throughout the house. Serena has been incredibly careless. Eleanor, her calls, her boasts, her manipulation of Michael. Every damning word." My heart swelled with pride for my husband. He had anticipated her every move, used her arrogance against her. "Tomorrow night, at the meeting," he explained, "I need you to maintain your current persona, the confused, frail Eleanor. It will make her overconfident. I will act hesitant, overwhelmed, grateful for her help. And then, when she presents the Willowbrook papers, I will ask her specific questions, questions about her research, about the policies of the facility, about why she chose it. I'll make her explain it all, in front of Michael. With the recorders running, he looked at me, his eyes full of love and resolve. She thinks she has us trapped, but we're going to spring our own trap. And she won't even see it coming. I nodded, my mind racing. The pieces were falling into place, my silent observation, Arthur's meticulous investigation. Tomorrow night, Serena would play her hand, believing she held all the cards. But she had no idea she was walking into a meticulously laid ambush, orchestrated by the very people she sought to destroy. The day of reckoning dawned, sharp and clear. As I sat in my usual armchair, feigning a placid, unseeing gaze, Arthur spoke to me in hushed tones, outlining the final points of our strategy. "The trap is set, Eleanor," he murmured, his hand gently resting on my arm. "Serena will have to lie to Michael, to me. And then, her lies will be disproven, one by one. It won't be pretty," he sighed, his voice heavy. "Michael will be hurt, deeply. He'll feel betrayed by his wife, and perhaps even by me, for not telling him sooner, but it's better for him to learn the truth now, from us, than to discover it later when everything is lost. This is for his sake, too." I nodded slowly, a profound sadness settling in my heart for my grandson, but also a fierce conviction that this was necessary. Serena arrived precisely on schedule, an hour before Michael was due. She walked in with a brisk, businesslike air, a folder clutched in her hand, her smile a little too wide, a little too confident. She sat opposite me, spreading the papers across the coffee table, as if staging a formal presentation. "Good morning, Arthur, Eleanor," she chirped, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "I've brought the admission documents for Willowbrook Manor. It's truly a reputable facility. Arthur, with an excellent comprehensive care program. They specialize in complex needs, as we discussed." Her gaze flickered to me. A silent, contemptuous assessment. Arthur played his part to perfection. He looked utterly overwhelmed, his shoulders slumped, his brow furrowed with a feigned struggle. "Thank you, Serena," he said, his voice laced with manufactured gratitude. "This is a lot. I'm just trying to do what's best for her, you know." He sighed dramatically, running a hand through his hair. Serena's smile tightened, a flicker of impatience crossing her features. "Of course, dear. But we must act quickly. That opening at Willowbrook won't last. They need to secure the spot." She pushed the papers closer to Arthur, a pen laid beside them. Arthur picked up a document, pretending to examine it with a bewildered air. "You've been so thorough, Serena. How did you manage to obtain so much specific information, so quickly? The policy details, the program specifics, it's all here." Serena hesitated, a tiny pause in her confident facade. "Well, I called them, of course, several times, and I may have visited recently, just to ensure it was suitable for Eleanor's unique situation." Her voice was smooth, but there was a subtle tremor, a hairline crack in her composure. "And their policy on patient assets?" Arthur pressed, his voice deceptively gentle. "Specifically, the transfer of major holdings upon admission? That seemed rather unusual to me." Serena's face paled. Her smile faltered. "Oh, that's standard practice, Arthur, for long-term care, to ensure continuous funding. It's all very ethical." Her eyes darted towards me, as if ensuring I was still blind and oblivious. "Is it?" Arthur asked, his voice still soft, but now with an underlying steel that sent a shiver down my spine. "Because I also noticed you somehow have our exact mortgage balance, the current property value of this house, and even the precise details of my pension and our investment portfolio, all listed in these preliminary forms. How did you come by all that information, Serena?" Serena visibly flinched. She stammered, her eyes wide with panic. I I must have gotten it from Michael. He must have told me. She tried to shift the blame. Desperate, Arthur's voice was now cold, devoid of all pretense. Michael doesn't know most of those details, Serena. He has never had access to our private financial records. My will, my pension, the mortgage. None of it. Just at that critical moment, the front door opened, and Michael entered, right on cue. "Hey everyone, how's Eleanor doing?" he called out, his voice cheerful, oblivious to the charged atmosphere. Serena, seizing the distraction, tried to regain control, leaping to her feet. "Michael, darling. Just in time. We're discussing your grandmother's care, and Arthur is just being difficult, as usual." Her voice was shrill, desperate. Arthur rose slowly, holding the damning folder of papers in his hand. He looked at Michael. His kind face hardened with a profound sorrow. "Michael," he said, his voice firm, "there are some things about your wife that you need to know, things that she has gone to great lengths to hide." Michael's smile vanished. "What are you talking about, Dad?" Arthur didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. With a click, he pressed play. The room was instantly filled with Serena's voice, clear and unmistakable. Her hushed whispers, her calculating tone, her cold disregard. "By Christmas, this will all be resolved. Then, the chilling 'she's just gone. The woman who raised you isn't really here anymore." Followed by her detailed plans to secure the power of attorney, to take the house, life savings, pension, and investments, and finally, the contemptuous, "The old lady is getting worse every day." Followed by her fabricated stories of my supposed decline. Michael's face, which had been confused, slowly turned white, then ashen. His jaw dropped, his eyes wide with horror and disbelief. He stared at Serena, then at the recorder in Arthur's hand, then back at Serena. Serena began to babble, her voice a frantic, desperate stream of denials. "Michael, it's not what you think. He's twisting my words. He's trying to make me look bad." But Michael wasn't listening. He looked at his wife, the woman he had sworn to love. His eyes filled with a pain so deep it made my heart ache. "Serena?" he whispered, his voice barely controlled, trembling with a raw, gut-wrenching betrayal. Is this true?" The silence that followed the last damning recording was thick, suffocating. Michael stood frozen, his face a landscape of disbelief that slowly, agonizingly, twisted into a cold, profound fury. He stared at Serena, his eyes searching, desperate for a plausible denial. Serena, however, was in full damage control mode. "Michael, darling, you can't believe this. They're manipulating you. This is a sick game they're playing, trying to turn you against me." Her voice was shrill, laced with panic, but still attempting to cast herself as the victim. It was my turn. My moment to finally speak, not as the frail, confused Eleanor, but as myself. I slowly turned my head, fixing my gaze directly on Serena. My voice, when it came, was steady and clear, cutting through her frantic protests. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Serena," I said, my tone devoid of emotion, yet ringing with authority. "More perfectly than you could ever imagine." Arthur remained still, observing. Michael, still reeling from the recordings, looked at me, confused by my sudden clarity. Serena frowned, her eyes narrowing, a flicker of suspicion finally entering her panicked mind. Then, I turned my head further, my gaze meeting Arthur's. For the first time in months, our eyes locked, truly seeing each other. My eyes, clear and sharp, conveyed all the love, gratitude, and fierce resolve I felt. "And I understood everything, Arthur," I added, my voice softer, filled with a shared understanding. Michael's mouth fell open, a silent gasp escaping his lips. Arthur's eyes widened, a dawning realization spreading across his face, quickly followed by a look of profound understanding and pride. Serena, however, went white as a sheet, the color draining from her face as if a plug had been pulled. The blood that had been coursing through her veins, fueling her deception, seemed to freeze. "You see, Serena," I continued, my voice gaining strength, I haven't been blind for over 2 months. A collective gasp filled the room. I chose not to tell anyone. I chose to watch, and listen, and wait. I slowly pushed myself up from the armchair. My movements no longer hesitant or uncertain, but deliberate and confident. I stood tall, facing Serena, no longer a victim, but a witness, a judge, and an executioner of her lies. I saw you go through my jewelry, Serena. I saw you photograph my documents. I overheard your conversations about redecorating my house, about other arrangements for me. I even witnessed your rather tasteless attempt to seduce my husband, Arthur, right here in this living room, while I lay supposedly helpless. Serena stammered, her denials growing weaker, more frantic. This is a lie. You're both lying. This is a sick, twisted game. A game you started, Serena, I countered, my voice firm. I then reached down to the side of my armchair, pulling out a slim folder I had hidden there, and a game I played. Here, I said, opening the folder, revealing a series of photographs. These are my own personal notes, my own photographic evidence, documenting every theft, every lie, every attempt to manipulate, each piece of jewelry you admired, each document you photographed, each valuable you cataloged for your own personal gain. Michael stared at the photographs, his face cycling through horror, betrayal, and finally, a cold, hard fury that eclipsed anything I had seen from him before. He turned to Serena, his voice raw, heartbroken. What have you done? What in God's name have you done? Serena tried to approach him, tears streaming down her face, pleading. Michael, please, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. But Michael snapped. The dam of his loyalty, his innocence, broke. He roared, a sound filled with agonizing pain and rage. Get out. Get out of this house. Get out of our lives, Serena. And don't you ever come back. Serena recoiled, her false tears drying instantly, replaced by a venomous glare. Fine. You want a divorce, Michael? Fine. But I'll take half of everything you own, and I'll make sure this family suffers. You'll regret this. Arthur, who had been silently observing, now stepped forward, his face grim. He pulled out another document from his manila envelope. Tom Richardson's final report. Serena, he said, his voice calm, cutting through her threats like a surgical blade. I think you'll find these documents rather interesting. They detail not just your attempts to defraud Eleanor and me, but also your history of identity theft and credit card fraud against several elderly clients in your previous employment. He laid the report on the table, the words felony charges clearly visible. So, Serena, Arthur continued, his gaze unwavering, you have a choice. You can disappear quietly, accept divorce terms without contest, and make no claims on any of Michael's assets, or those of this family. Or, you can face legal prosecution for all your crimes, both against us and against your past victims. The choice is yours. Serena stared at the report, then at Arthur, then at Michael's furious, heartbroken face. Her eyes burned with a hatred so intense it almost made me flinch. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed out of the house, leaving behind a profound silence. We never saw her again. Michael crumbled onto the sofa, his face buried in his hands, tears streaming down his cheeks. Dad, he choked out. Mama, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I went to him, putting my arms around him. It's all right, my dear boy, I said, stroking his hair. You couldn't have known. You're a good man, Michael, with a good heart. And Serena exploited that. But your goodness, your loyalty, that's what truly matters. I then looked at Arthur, my heart overflowing. And you, my love, I said, reaching for his hand. Thank you. Thank you for fighting for me. For us, I felt so loved, so protected, seeing you stand up for our family. 6 months later, Michael's divorce was finalized. Serena, true to her nature, vanished without a trace, presumably to avoid the legal consequences Arthur had laid bare. Our family, though scarred, emerged stronger, united by shared truth and renewed trust. And I, Eleanor, learned a profound lesson. Sometimes, pretending to be blind allows you to see more clearly than you ever have before.